Hi, welcome to Section 2, creating your first components. In Section 2, we're going to start by creating your first component. We're going to see how we can show that in the parent component, and we're also going to learn about string interpolation. In the second video, we're going to dive into directives and find out about Angular's built-in directives, ng-for and ng-if, and we're also going to learn how to create our own custom directive. And in the third video, we're going to continue with directives by looking at how ng-class and ng-style can be used to conditionally style elements on your component. In the fourth video, we're going to learn about data binding, about how we can bind to properties and elements. We're also going to create a material form so that we can discover the power of two-way binding. In the fifth video, we're going to create our second component, a child component, and learn about how we can pass data between the parent and the child using the input and output decorators. And lastly, you're going to test your knowledge with a quiz. So, welcome to 2.1, let's create your first component. In this video, we're going to start by creating your first component. We're then going to show this component in the parent component using a selector.
We're then going to learn about what string interpolation is and how we can use that to display data from our logic file to our HTML template.
So, how do you create a component in Angular? And how we do this is by opening up the terminal or command line and navigating to your application folder, and then simply typing in the command. We could type in ng, g for generate, c for component, and then the name of your component. And this will create 4 files as we've previously discussed. So let's go ahead and open up your terminal or command line and do that now. So first of all, navigate to your application folder, and then type in the command. And we'll simply call this component assignments. Hit enter. There we go, and that component's now been created. So if we head over to our IDE, we can see that. So if we open up our source and app folder, we can see that it's created an assignments folder, and that's our component. And this contains a CSS file, a HTML file, which contains some stock text, and a logic file, which is the bones of our component. You can see within this file there is a component decorator, and that's imported from Angular core, and that just tells Angular this is a component to be used. You can see here there is a selector, and this selector name is how this component is accessed from other components. You can see here we have the template URL, and that references our HTML file, and also styles URLs, which references our CSS file. And this is actually an array because it could potentially contain more than one CSS file. And then the component is exported to expose this component to other components. Now, to register this component app-wide, this assignments component name needs to be registered in the module. You can see by using that shortcut, it's automatically added that. So it's imported it from its folder, and then it's added it to the declarations. And now this component can be imported from any other component within the application. Back in the assignments component, you can also see it's generated a constructor for us, and an ng on init. The ng on init isn't used straight off the bat. This is used to load something on the initial load of the component, but we'll leave it there for now. So I think it's time to fire up this application. If you head back to your terminal, and if you remember, the command is ng-serve. So that's going to build the project and compile it. Okay, so now our project's compiled successfully, we can head over to the browser and go for localhost 4200. Okay, so there's our application as we left it previously, but it's not showing our component we've just created. If we head back to the IDE, we'll see why that is. So if we go back into our HTML file, we can see there was some stock text just to say assignments works. But why isn't this being displayed in the browser now? Well, that's because the only component bootstrapped is the app.component.html. So if we go and look at this component, we can see this is what's being shown, all those buttons we created in the intro. Now, we don't really need those anymore, so let's get rid of them. And the way we access our assignments component is by referencing the selector. So if you head back to the assignments component.ts, you'll see there is a selector, app assignments. So we simply need to go back to the app.component and reference this selector name, app-assignments. And we do that just like we create a HTML tag. So if we now head back to our browser, we should see our stock text, assignment works. Okay, our buttons are gone and our assignment works. So what we have here is our parent component, the app.component showing the hello world, and then our child component being displayed within the selector assignment works. So this is what we were talking about previously with Angular being a single page application. There are two components on it, but it's still one page. So head back to the IDE and back to our assignments.component.html, and we'll remove this stock text. And we could write anything we want, but I think it's time to look at string interpolation. And string interpolation is a binding from the logic file into the HTML file. So if we head into our assignments.component.ts, we can create what's called a property in TypeScript. Now, a property is similar to a variable in JavaScript. The difference being is that you can declare what type it is, such as a string, a date, a number, or any of the types available in TypeScript. And we create a property by declaring a name, use equals. To show this title in the component, we need to go back to our HTML file and use a double curly braces to reference the title. And this title now references the title in the logic. So if we go back to the browser, this should now be reflected in the app. And there's your child component being displayed in the parent. So in this video, we've learned how to create our first component using the Angular shortcut. We've also learned how a component is made up and how to display that component within other components. And we now know how to use string interpolation to display data within the HTML file.